In 1970, I was living on North Water Street, George Harrington's hippie palace, the first kind of communal, hippie commune on Nantucket. And we knew that there was a narc living with us, so nobody wanted to get busted, particularly me. So I said, I'm out of here. And I moved out to Sconset, and I rented a place in Codfish Park.
I came here, I married in. So my wife had a long history in Sconset. Her family came here since the 19-teens and bought a house that I happen to be looking at out this window right now. And it was interesting because Sconset was very appealing to Midwesterners. Lots of people from Detroit, which was actually the #1 non-New England city represented here, came here, and people from Cincinnati, which is where my wife's family came out here. And when they first came here, there was a railroad, and they took the railroad from the boat out here down to Codfish Park, and somebody met them down there and lugged their luggage up. Now, they only had about 3 years of the railroad, because in 1918 it actually went bankrupt. They did pick up the steel and send it to Europe, and unfortunately it got there a little bit after the war was over, World War I. But anyway, her family has a pretty long history here. So I married in, and I first came here in the 50s to visit a godmother who lived in Sconset. But we didn't move here until the 80s.
I met my former wife on a chairlift. I'm from Sun Valley, Idaho. Met her, and she said she was moving to Nantucket Island to open a place called the Morning Glory Cafe. At the very same time, we met Bob Shetterly and had an option on doing that. So in 1980, moved here and actually moved above the Sconset Market. And I lived above the Sconset Market for 38 years.
Well, I'm a family of 13. I did not grow up with 13 siblings. I grew up with just only 2. The others were all older, had gone and got married, and were raising their own families. My dad always introduced us as the second family.
This is our 50th summer in Sconset. We just had a little party the other day, and we had napkins as help us celebrate our 50th summer in Sconset.
We're both tennis players, and tennis court facilities were kind of not that easy to come by, except you could play at the casino out here, so we would come out.
My parents met at the casino in a movie in, I'm going to say 1934, maybe 35. When they were sitting in the balcony, they didn't know each other, and my father put gum in my mother's hair. She was sitting in front of him. That was the story my mother told. My father had a different take on it altogether. But so that was the beginning of that relationship, and maybe they should have stayed away from it. But so my grandparents came, and then my dad obviously married my mother, and that got the Benchley and Dickinson family meshed up. They happened to both be on the North Bluff in Sconset. And then so I started coming as a young kid because I was along with my family and my sister, and then my mother's family, they had kids and grandkids and everything, and so there was this great clump of Dickinsons and Benchleys that invaded Sconset in the 40s and 50s.
A little more. There was the porch, which is a laundrette, and there was a little Chinese restaurant there. If you go way back, a little farther back than 50 years, there was the gas station. You could get gas in Sconset for your automobile. You could get a barber. You could get a haircut. John Salvas did both.
And the whole village in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s had this kind of complete village, innocence to it. It was kind of undiscovered by commercialism or, the new tourists who were showing up. There was no shuttle bus dumping people every day. And while there was, like the tour buses that would wander through every few hours, people weren't riding their bikes out there. There was no bike path. it was still like an island on an island, Sconset, and it had its sweetness about it. There was no fancy Nantucket Golf Club. There was just Skinner's, where we all played golf. There was the St. Kitty Head Golf Club, but that was very low-key. It was all just low-key.
I don't know if gentility is the right word. I mean, we're a little skittish about saying we're special, because Sconseteers used to get up at town meeting and say, we're special. And that not only rubbed people elsewhere on the island the wrong way, but sometimes it rubbed us the wrong way too, because, you know, we have a lovely village that we enjoy. And as when you arrived today, you said, boy, it's quiet out here. And traffic doesn't really congregate on the streets of Sconset because there's nowhere to go beyond here. This is sort of an end point as opposed to a pass-through. But my kids grew up here, and it feels no different from the 80s when they grew up to today. You know, 30 plus years later, it is still the place where the kids can ride their bikes out of the driveway and go down to market and spend a little too much money on an ice cream cone. They've been doing that for a long time.
In 1999, I got a phone call from Eric Urban, a good buddy of mine from Sconset, and from Pepper Fraser, Sr., standing in Sconset saying, John, they're selling the Moby Dick. Do you want to buy one of the cottages? And I was in New York City in my apartment in Soho. I was already a professional actor. I was on Broadway at the time. And I heard that they were selling it. And so I said, I'll be right there. They said, what? I said, I'll be right there. Don't move. I went down the stairs, jumped in a cab, went to LaGuardia, went to the Marine Air Terminal, got on a plane, flew to Nantucket, got in a cab, and went out in Sconset. And 2 hours later, I was there with them. They were like, what are you doing? I said, I'd be right here. They said, well, what do you want? Eric said, I'm going to buy this one in the front. Pepper said, take your pick. Because there were like lots of cottages. I bought 6 of them, John. 6 bedrooms and 6 baths around a little courtyard with a wishing well in it. And I paid $60,000 for those 6 cottages, $10,000 each. And they were right next to the restaurant itself. So if you walked up the front steps to the summer house, there are the cottages in that little compound to the right of it. And I built a 7th cottage to protect me from the summer house and that crowd. And then, so I lived there for 25 years. That was my summer house. So I lived in New York and I lived in Sconset.